Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed and perhaps a little surprised. Today, we're diving deep into the high-octane world of Formula One. You sent us some truly, well, thought-provoking material from the DRS zone, specifically a recent video discussion. It's titled Lobato. Estoy cansado del buenismo actual de la F1. It's a candid, pretty fiery critique about what some are calling excessive niceness in modern F1, especially in the context of a very controversial team order.
Indeed. And our mission for you today is really to unpack this perspective. We need to understand the specific McLaren incident that sparked such intense debate, and then maybe explore the broader implications, for the spirit of competition in professional racing. What's fascinating here, I think, is how one specific event can just illuminate a much larger conversation about authenticity, the changing nature of elite sport, and maybe what we as fans truly want to see on the track.
Okay, let's unpack this core idea then, buenismo. The source makes a strong, almost, exasperated argument that Formula One has become, frankly, too nice. What exactly does this concept of buenismo mean in the F1 context, and why is the commentator, so critical of it?
Right. The commentator from DRS Zone argues that F1 has entered a phase he terms buenismo, or buenrollismo, which broadly translates to an excessive, almost manufactured focus on good vibes, harmony, and like a squeaky clean, positive image. It's presented as something that goes beyond genuine sportsmanship. It feels more like a forced narrative almost.
A forced narrative.
Yeah, he suggests this image crafting, even manifesting in what he calls scripted or teledirected bad feelings, maybe amplified in shows like Netflix's Drive to Survive. It means the sport is losing its very essence, naturalness, and truth.
So it's about a perceived sanitization then. This isn't just about drivers shaking hands after a tough race, but an almost deliberate effort to smooth over those rough edges that once defined the sport.
Precisely. The core concern, is that F1 is losing what the commentator vividly calls its criminal instinct. He defines this as that raw, ruthless, no-holds-barred competitive drive, the kind that characterized the great pilots of history.
Right, that edge.
Exactly, that fierce, almost predatory edge that made heroes and villains and created truly legendary moments. He feels this buenismo is systematically eroding that competitive fire, replacing it with something far more palatable maybe, but ultimately less authentic.
That's a powerful indictment. It suggests a fundamental shift in the very soul of the sport. It sounds like the source believes that by trying to make everything appear positive and harmonious, we're actually stripping away the very elements that make elite competitions so thrilling and unpredictable.
Yeah, and this forced positivity, this buenismo, becomes particularly evident when we look at specific incidents, like that controversial McLaren team order.
Yes, here's where it gets really interesting. The source centers its critique around that specific incident involving McLaren drivers Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. For those who might have missed it, can you just walk us through what happened and why this particular event became such a flashpoint for this whole buenismo discussion?
Absolutely. So the situation unfolded during a race where Oscar Piastri suffered from a particularly bad pit stop, a delay that cost him precious track position,
Yeah, a costly mistake.
very costly. Subsequently, in a move that immediately drew the ire of the DRS Zone commentator, Piastri was asked to yield his position to his teammate, Lando Norris, to compensate for this pit stop error.
Compensate being the key word there. That sounds less like a strategic team move and more like an attempt to, correct a perceived injustice.
Exactly. And the crucial question raised in the source, which really underpins the whole buenismo argument, is this. Would they have done the same if Lando had had the bad stop?
Good question.
It's not just about the fairness of the swap, right? It highlights a perceived inconsistency and the forced, almost artificial nature of this compensation being applied in the name of team harmony. It's not a natural evolution of a race, it's an intervention.
Okay, so the intervention itself is problematic, but what about the driver's reactions?
What's truly fascinating and what the source spends considerable time dissecting is Piastri's reaction. On the radio, he openly stated he didn't agree with the order. He believed a pit stop is part of racing. Its inherent risks and rewards.
There's a fair point.
A very fair point. However, he then immediately added that he would do it for the team. Now, the commentator interprets this not as pure altruism, but as Piastri being smarter than he seems.
Oh, how so?
Viewing it as a highly strategic move. Think about it. He lost 3 points. They were fighting for second and third, where the difference is 3 points, not first and second, where it's 7 points. That's important.
Right. The points difference matters.
So he loses 3 points. But the commentator suggests Piastri now suddenly feels they owe me one,
Mm.
or like he has a wild card for future races, a bit of leverage.
Ah, I see. So the core insight here isn't just about a team order itself, but how it exposes a shift in driver mentality, perhaps. What looks like simple team harmony might actually be a very strategic, almost transactional form of loyalty.
Exactly. The source suggests it's a calculated decision where Piastri's playing a longer game.
Playing the long game. Okay.
Yeah, the source implies that while on the surface it looks like good sportsmanship, underneath, a very careful score is being kept. And the commentator even goes further, questioning whether Norris, if asked to give points back in a reciprocal scenario, would argue that he only received 3 points, not 7.
Oh, wow. That adds another layer of complexity.
It really does. It highlights the inherent difficulty in quantifying these favors and debts, doesn't it? And how it complicates the notion of genuine fairness within the team. It transforms what should be spontaneous, high-stakes competition into this complex web of obligations and repayments, things that are managed rather than purely raced.
Okay, if we connect this to the bigger picture then, McLaren's decision, according to the source, put them into unnecessary trouble. And, more importantly, set a strange precedent. This raises a really important question about the long-term implications for the sport, doesn't it? Where does this compensation end?
Exactly.
If you start evening out the playing field for pit stop errors, what about bad strategy calls? What about mechanical failures that aren't the driver's fault? Where do you draw the line?
Precisely. The commentator really hammers this point home, asking, will teams be compensating for bad pit stops in crucial championship-deciding races, like Abu Dhabi, Qatar, or Las Vegas? What's the ultimate limit?
It could get messy.
Very messy. The source dramatically describes this as opening up a mafioso family analogy, where favors are meticulously owed and remembered for life. It transforms the sport into an intricate system of reciprocal obligations, rather than a meritocracy based purely on performance on the day.
That mafioso family analogy certainly paints a vivid picture of complex obligations, but just playing devil's advocate for a second, for a team principle, isn't there an argument that these kinds of team orders, while maybe lacking that raw criminal instinct, actually foster a more stable, long-term team dynamic, better resource management, especially when competing for, say, the Constructors' Championship? Does the source touch on that perspective?
That's a fair question, but the source is pretty singular in its critique here. It focuses almost entirely on the perceived downsides, the loss of authenticity. It contrasts this recent McLaren order with a historic F1 team order specifically from Germany 2010. Involving Fernando Alonso and Felipe Massa at Ferrari, that caused a huge scandal, a massive public outcry at the time.
I remember that. Fernando was faster than you.
Exactly. Yet, the current F1 order, despite being for a pit stop error, not a clear strategic championship move, is now being normalized, even apparently applauded in the paddock. This, for the commentator, suggests a profound shift in what is considered acceptable or even desirable in the sport.
A shift in norms.
Yes. The idea, as he puts it, is that everyone is becoming domesticated, losing that wild competitive edge.
This discussion about Buenismo also naturally leads to a comparison of drivers then, almost a generational divide. The source describes Piastri and Norris as soft and cold, lacking edges, not generating the kind of dramatic headlines that once dominated F1. They're seen as having many young followers, sure, but perhaps lacking that fiery, uncompromising competitive instinct of the past.
So who does the commentator from DRS Zone see as the ultimate antithesis of this new school approach?
Max Verstappen. Immediately. He's presented as the prime example of an old school or old guard driver. The source vividly describes Verstappen with almost a sense of admiration, actually laughing at the very idea of yielding his position due to a teammate's bad pit stop. It's really laughing.
Apparently so. He later refused to comment on the McLaren situation publicly, but his clear amusement spoke volumes. The commentator states there's basically a 0% probability he would ever cede a position to a teammate in a similar circumstance, emphasizing his 360 vision and acknowledging that for something he is so good, he embodies that criminal instinct the source feels is dangerously missing from the modern grid. He's seen as just uncompromisingly focused on his win.
So Verstappen truly embodies that uncompromising spirit. It makes me wonder then how this new school approach might be subtly changing the very character of racing itself, not just for the drivers, but for the fans who follow them. What does the source say about other drivers? How do they fit into this old school versus new school competitive camp?
Well, the source speculates on others, and it's quite a telling breakdown of the grid's personalities through this Buenismo lens. Fernando Alonso is definitively placed in the old-school camp. No surprise there. As is a past Lewis Hamilton, their competitive fire and self-interest, the source implies, would absolutely prevent them from yielding in such a scenario. They're about maximizing their own outcome first.
Right.
Charles Leclerc is another mention, seen as having that same fierce, uncompromising drive, are willing to concede easily. Carlos Sainz, interestingly, is depicted as more of a team man.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he might discuss the order, maybe argue a bit, but ultimately would probably comply for the team's benefit.
Yeah.
Shows a different calculation of loyalty, perhaps. George Russell is a perhaps. Someone who might accept after some debate. Indicating a potential shift or a more diplomatic approach, though the commentator admits this could be a surprise.
So a bit of an unknown with Russell.
A bit. And then there's a fascinating mention of Gabriel Bortoledo, a promising young driver, who, the source says, smells a bit like a driver of character, of race, and more of the old school.
One to watch maybe through that lens. That's a really comprehensive breakdown. It definitely highlights a perceived generational shift in competitive mindset, with fewer drivers seemingly possessing that absolute uncompromising drive to win at all costs, even against their own teammate. Now, beyond individual drivers and specific incidents, the source extends its criticism to a broader perception that F1 itself has become excessively civilized. What examples are given to illustrate this point? What's the underlying frustration here?
This raises an important question about the overall environment, doesn't it? The commentator points to things like a guide to overtaking.
A guide to overtaking? Seriously?
Yeah, suggesting that such detailed rules were never necessary in the past because drivers simply understood the art of it, the unwritten rules. It feels like we've become excessively civilized, leaving too little to the luck of competition and the raw talent of the people behind the wheel.
Taking the human element out almost.
Sort of, yeah. The source expresses a personal feeling of frustration, returning from a Grand Prix, watching how everything is changing. It's about how many elements now determine a race outcome, reliability, driver execution, strategy, pit stops. And the debate about which of these should be compensated is becoming too complex. And in the commentator's view, pretty illogical. It's as if they're trying to control every variable to the point where the raw essence of racing is lost, replaced by a kind of managed, predictable competition.
We've taken a deep dive today into the fascinating and often frustrating tension between raw, unadulterated competition and evolving notions of fairness and team dynamics in Formula One. The source we explored from DRS zones certainly doesn't pull any punches in its critique of modern F1's buenismo, seeing it as a move away from the sport's thrilling, sometimes untamed past, and maybe even a threat to its very character.
Absolutely. This discussion really makes you consider the very essence of professional sport, doesn't it? Is the pursuit of an immaculate, conflict-free image truly beneficial in the long run? Or does this strip away the thrilling, sometimes brutal authenticity that defines elite competition? And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it raises an important question for you, the listener.
Yeah.
In any high-stakes competitive environment, whether it's sports, business, even your daily life, where do you draw the line? Between fairness and that uncompromising drive to win, what do you think is sacrificed when you prioritize harmony over pure, unadulterated competitive instinct?
That's a powerful thought to leave you with. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of F1 and you want more sharp, unfiltered insights like those from the DRS Zone, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell on the DRS Zone channel. It's a great way to stay well informed on all the latest news and discussions shaping the sport. Thank you for joining us.